think sometimes we struggle with relating a God who is responsible for this vast universe of time and space we can hardly imagine with the God we pray to when we're worried about our loved one who is ill. How is it that this is the same God? And it's hard for our minds to comprehend, but that is the whole point of the incarnation.
On In Good Faith, we believe that all faith traditions have something to teach us about how God is working in the world and in our lives. So join us as we listen and learn. You've heard the phrase, let's take a bird's eye view, when you're talking about a problem and you're getting bogged down in details, and someone says, well, let's zoom out to the 30,000-foot view and see the big picture. Well, our guest today has dedicated her life to the big picture, not just the bird's eye or 30,000 feet, but Hubble telescope level view, as in she used to be the senior project scientist for the Hubble Space Telescope mission. The sci-fi fan in me was excited to talk with someone who knows that much about astronomy, but the spiritual part of me was especially excited to hear Jennifer Wiseman talk about her personal experiences learning to see from a God's eye view. Dr. Jennifer Wiseman is an astrophysicist, author, and speaker. She studies the process of star and planet formation in our galaxy using radio, optical, and infrared telescopes. And she's worked with several international observatories. She's currently a senior astrophysicist at the Goddard Space Flight Center. Dr. Wiseman is a fellow of the American Scientific Affiliation, a network of Christians in science. Dr. Wiseman will be speaking at the Faith and Science Conference coming up in Rome, Italy, June 2025. You can check out the conference schedule at faithandscience.eu.
I grew up in a rural area of northern Arkansas. So this is the Ozark Mountains. The Ozarks were sometimes called hillbillies, but we don't mind. The area is beautiful. So it's forested hills, a lot of rivers, lakes, just a lot of natural beauty. So I grew up taking that for granted, and I grew up on a farm where we had livestock. But this hilly, forested farmland had just a lot of other places to explore. So I grew up with the privilege of just being able to wander around and wander through forests and meadows and along streams and just noticing the natural world. I think that's how this all started, was just growing up in an area where nature was all around me and much appreciated. I also just love animals, so grew up in a place where you could see all kinds of wildlife. So I loved watching animals, watching nature, and that included the night sky because at that time, at least, the night sky was still pretty dark there. We could see a lot of stars.
Could you see the Milky Way?
Of course, yeah. You could see the Milky Way and see the sky from horizon to horizon. I really wasn't contemplating becoming a professional astronomer or a professional anything as I was growing up. I was just growing up. But I had some encouragement from many directions for which I'm grateful to just keep exploring and to reach high with whatever my interests might be. So one was my own family. My parents were not able to go to college, but they made sure that their kids were able to, and I really appreciate that. And my oldest brother was quite a bit older than I, and he was the first to go, and he also had an aptitude for science, and he could see that I did. So my brother Mike really encouraged me as I was in high school and stuff to aim high. He and his wife would send me little science presents at Christmas and things like that. And then to apply for a variety of colleges where I could really pursue science seriously if I wanted to. So I'm grateful to him. I'm grateful to my high school, all the years of my public school. I mean, it was a rural area, but these teachers from kindergarten through my senior year were very committed and dedicated to teaching us in an atmosphere of love, in an atmosphere of respect, and of just making us interested in the subjects they were teaching. And I so appreciate them, my guidance counselors. So they in high school encouraged us as students to apply to any place we might want to try, and they would support us. So I did that. And then finally, I grew up in a Christian family and a church family that was very loving and supportive. And while we didn't know anything about professional science, we didn't even have a university for hours at that time, but we did understand nature as God's creation and that it was good. And so science just seemed like a natural way to honor God by studying the details of God's creation. And I still carry that ethos with me. And then, of course, there's the space itself, which is, I was very curious about the little that we were aware of about space, about the universe, about galaxies and planets. And it was during those years that there was a program on television called Cosmos, and Carl Sagan was the host. And
I have on my list, ask her if she remembers the pale blue dot. Carl Sagan.
Okay, so
talking about that.
Yeah, so I do, but what I remember even more was watching these programs every week and being shown these images from the Voyager spacecraft that were going past the outer planets in our solar system and sending back the first close-up images of these planets and their moons. So I was seeing these moons like Europa and Io and these just wild places, some of them covered with ice, some of them covered with volcanoes. And I thought this was the greatest thing humans had ever done, which was to send this spacecraft to go and take pictures and send us back information from places that we really could never go ourselves.
That's really just such an interesting conglomeration of experiences that go into making a scientific life, also a life of faith. I really liked something in your bio that said the process of star and planet formation and galaxies using radio, optical, and infrared. It's so fascinating to me that there are ways we can explore that our eyes can't see, whether it's infrared at one end or ultraviolet at the other end. And then I just think we know that God says he sees things differently than we do. That almost seems like a tie-in with faith and religion, that there is that which is beyond us. And was that always important to you? It sounds like you were always aware of it growing up in a home with faith.
Let's talk about the science part first, because you mentioned a very interesting point that there are different kinds of light, and our eyes are only sensitive to a very small portion of the wider, what we call the electromagnetic spectrum of radiation. So we see the colors of the rainbow, red to violet, but there's a lot of light or radiation coming from things in space that is outside that window of the rainbow that we can see. So there's the redder than red light, that's infrared light, or even more in that direction, lower energy radiation that we call radio waves. And then on the other side, the bluer than blue light is called ultraviolet light. So astronomy now uses telescopes that are sensitive to all these different wavelengths, or sometimes we call them frequencies of radiation. And we learn a lot more. There's so much more to see and learn in the universe when you have these tools that can detect infrared light or radio waves or X-rays, along with telescopes that see the radiation that our eyes can see. But of course, telescopes enable us to see it in much more detail and to see much deeper in the universe. And we are enabled to see things, amazing things in the universe that humans never saw before. Now, let me relate that to your question about kind of the spiritual aspect of this. And I never thought about it actually until you just asked me the question, but I think there is a parallel. And again, I don't want to confuse the two. Science is our tool to study the physical laws, the matter and energy in the universe. That science is a great tool for that, but it's not the right tool to answer most of our spiritual questions. But in the kind of spiritual realm, I remember this story in the Old Testament where the followers of God were very discouraged. They were being threatened by an invading or an attacking army. And for that moment, God opened their eyes and they were able to see in the kind of spiritual realm that there was a lot more going on all around them.
Yeah, this is 2 Kings. I love this story.
He was given a little glimpse that there was more going on than was perceptible with just regular vision. And that's kind of, in the spiritual realm kind of thing. But there is more going on, than we just in our day-to-day perceptions often realize. And sometimes we're given little tools to help us get a glimpse of this. So that story in the Old Testament was like a little spiritual glimpse of what was going on. And then just getting back to the physical world and the scientific realm, these different wavelengths of light that we don't see normally with our own eyes are revealing to us a universe much more majestic than we would have ever imagined. And I just love being a part of that and being able to see some of these phenomena and share with others what we're finding out.
I really resonate with that feeling of awe and discovering parts of the universe. And I think so many of us have those moments as kids when we find out that there were dinosaurs, or that the circle in the sky that we call the moon is actually almost a small planet just hanging there. And that seems magical, but then over time we get so used to it. And I'm really grateful for the chance to talk with someone who investigates that sphere, no pun intended, sphere of knowledge in a way that seems to keep you in that state of wonder and discovery while lots of us grow up and maybe stop seeing the moon and the stars for what they are. I like what this awakens in me. This is In Good Faith. Back with more in just a moment. Let me tell you about Kaboom, a thrilling audio adventure podcast made for the whole family to enjoy together. Whether it's a teleportation experiment gone wrong or an ancient Viking curse wreaking havoc on the high school football team, Kaboom has an adventure made just for you. With a new adventure every episode, you'll meet magical creatures, explore outer worlds, and maybe learn some valuable life lessons along the way. Subscribe to Kaboom on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back to In Good Faith. We're speaking with astrophysicist Jennifer Wiseman. Now, we connected with you because we were very interested in an upcoming conference in June, faithandscience.eu, if people want to check that out. And my understanding is your keynote presentation, one of the first days, is called Universe Properties. And so at a faith and science symposium like this, can you summarize what you want to share there about those particular ideas?
This conference, which I'm glad I'll be speaking, but I'm even more interested in going so that I can hear the other speakers and be part of the conversations. But it's really going to bring together discussion of lots of different kinds of science. So the universe, astrophysics, but also neuroscience, the brain, and think about them in the larger context of what are we learning and what does it teach us about humanity and about life and about our values. My talk will really be a general discussion of what amazing things we're learning about the universe these days with our various kinds of telescopes and detectors. We are finding out that the universe is rich, it's vast. There are 200 million galaxies at least in our observable universe, and then each one of those galaxies can contain hundreds of millions, sometimes billions of stars. And so we're learning things now about the richness of the universe as a whole, and also how it has developed and changed over time, because astronomy is like a time machine. Everything we look at with a telescope, we're seeing it as it was when the light left that object or reflected off of it and came to our telescope, because it takes time for light to travel at the speed of light, which is fast, but it's not infinitely fast. So we're seeing things as they were. So in our own galaxy, when we look to the far sides of the Milky Way, we can be looking at well over 100,000 years in the past. The nearest big spiral galaxy, Andromeda, is over 2 million light years away. And now with our telescopes, we're seeing some galaxies that are many millions or even billions of light years away. So it means we're seeing them as they were closer to the beginning of the universe. And we can compare these early primitive galaxies with ones closer to our own Milky Way and see how galaxies have changed over cosmic time. And indeed, we're finding lots of planetary systems around other stars. We call those exoplanets, and that's a hot topic now, too. And of course, we'd like to know if any of those star systems are similar to our own. And of course, we're curious to know if there's life beyond Earth. So anyway, my talk will be to kind of present that whole progression of the universe as we see it observationally as kind of a backdrop to the other speakers talking about what it means for life and how we might interpret it. There'll be some theologians and philosophers there as well talking about how this feeds into any sense of kind of purpose and how we live and how we might fold in a sense of spirituality into these things. Again, being careful to keep what we learn through science as science, and then how we use that knowledge to enrich other aspects of our lives carefully, like our spirituality, our faith.
You've used in an interview that we saw the words of a combination of humility and curiosity that enable someone to both pursue their faith and scientific endeavors. Something about looking at the stars or the grandeur of nature for many people is an awe-inspiring or an awe-inducing experience that seems almost like a spiritual quality. And I'm wondering, of the things you have observed and have learned, is there a moment or two, could you tell me the story, when you felt that awe or that sort of something so much bigger than we understand?
Oh, there have been many of those moments. I continue to be fascinated by space and by the universe, even though I've been working in the field for decades now. Looking at these images from different telescopes, it never gets old. But I tell you what moves me the most, and this is not unique, it's moved countless others around the planet, is something called the ultra-deep field. And the ultra-deep field is an image taken by the Hubble Space Telescope. 1,000 little smudges of light. Well, each one of these little smudges of light is another galaxy. And as you look at the little swirls and the little ellipticals and realize that each one of those little swirls is its own little island of hundreds of billions of stars, and if any of them are just like the Milky Way, then many, if not most, of those stars have planets around them, just like we found the stars in our own Milky Way do. And there's endless ways you can imagine the richness of our universe. I often wish I could just blink my eyes and go to this galaxy in that field or go to that one and just look around. And I think even though, we can spout off numbers and distances and all of that, it doesn't mean a whole lot in our human brains. But when we look at a picture like this and realize what we're looking at, I think it inspires, at least for me and for many others, a great sense of awe, of wonder, of curiosity, of humility, perhaps even a little holy fear in a good sense. But that, I think, is the most moving image for me.
Thank you so much. Dr. Wiseman, you've talked about how God developed natural laws that permitted or were favorable to the creation of human life, animal life, all life that we know. And it occurred to us that it could have been done otherwise. How does that make you think about what God's purposes are?
There's been a lot of speculation, or at least contemplation, I would say, that some of the characteristics of our universe seem finely tuned so that life could develop and be sustained. Some of the fundamental forces of nature and some of the fundamental constants that govern, for example, how atoms hold themselves together or how gravity works or things like that, are very precise. And if they were slightly different, then maybe stars would never have been able to form. Maybe atoms would not be stable, things like that. We've required a long period of our universe, billions of years of our universe, to take the form and distribution that we see now. So fine-tuning sometimes indicates to people that must have been a divine purpose for everything. And I find that to be an interesting and a thoughtful observation. However, I would note it with a caution because I was a believer in God long before I ever heard about fine-tuning. So you don't need this argument for faith. And in fact, if we someday, through our physics, which is ever-changing, if we found out that, hey, wait, in fact, those fundamental constants could have been a whole range of things, and we'd still end up with planets and life, that really wouldn't affect my faith. That would just say, wow, God was pretty amazing to set up a universe that's robust and that would end up forming life one way or the other. So I understand these fine-tuning arguments. They are interesting, but I just share them with a cautionary note. You still have to ask the ancient philosophical question, why is there something at all? Why is there something and not nothing? And not just life. I mean, the life that this universe has enabled is able to think about itself. We're having this conversation right now. Why is that even a possibility? And that, to me, is really more moving toward congruence with the idea of purpose and faith, is the fact that we're even here to ask these questions.
Finally, I wonder, just if I could ask a little bit personally about the faith aspect, just separate from science. Obviously, you were taught about God. Do you remember why you believed? Or even through time, and that may have changed in the journey, a spiritual journey of a lifetime, reasons that you have faith?
So I was raised in a loving Christian family. I'm very grateful for that. My parents were faithful servants in the local church. And then, I learned a lot from Sunday school teachers and youth group leaders and all of those people who gave of themselves to introduce us to God and to a life of faith. So for them, I'm very grateful. At some point in my childhood or adolescence, I think I realized that this wasn't just about me learning things about the Bible and answering all the questions. It was that I needed to decide, if my life is going to be committed to God and more specifically to following Jesus Christ. And I think I understood that the best that I could at the time and made that commitment of faith. So for me, the walk of faith, of belief, was not hard. I saw the amazing wonders of creation. I experienced love, not from perfect people, definitely from imperfect people, but nevertheless, those realities I experienced and just confirmed to me the reality of God. My faith walk has more been about discipleship. How do you follow and walk with God in each new phase of life? And when you're faced with new challenges and new difficulties and different relationships and different pressures. And so every day of being a disciple of Jesus is a brand new day with brand new opportunities and brand new questions and brand new challenges. So I certainly have faced a lot of those challenges and questions and struggles, as well as joys in every phase of my life, even lots of failures. And that continues now, and I'm sure will for the rest of my life. So my faith life is not really one of some dramatic conversion, as it is one of learning how to seek God in every phase. And really, the bulk of the work in science is not those eureka moments that make the news. It's the day-to-day challenge and pressure of writing papers or supervising students or teaching or getting grants, writing grant proposals to get support for one's research, or having failures in the lab or disappointments or just working with difficult people sometimes, or having too much email to answer. All the things that are common to all of us in this day and age. It is that less glamorous walk of faith where I also sense God's presence and help every day. I'm generally not praying for some huge eureka discovery every day, although that would be great, but I'm generally praying that God will help me through this next meeting or this next deadline. And I find that the God of the universe that's beyond our imagination and majesty is also the God who knows the number of hairs on our head and is our helper. I have this verse my mother taught me when I was just a little child that's, God is my helper. And I have it pasted over my desk at home. to remind me that I'm not alone and that even in some of the more mundane aspects of life, God is here to help. He's on our side. And that is the way my faith walk works.
Help in teaching, help in meetings, even help in podcast interviews.
Yes.
I suppose. Finally, is there something I should ask you I don't know to ask you?
I think sometimes we struggle with relating a God who is responsible for this vast universe of time and space we can hardly imagine with the God we pray to when we're worried about our loved one who is ill. How is it that this is the same God? And it's hard for our minds to comprehend, but that is the whole point of the incarnation, that amazing word that basically says that the God of the universe experienced life as a human and for the purpose of showing us the very nature of God in Jesus Christ. And that is the connection. For Christians, the center of the universe is not us. The center of the universe is not even a place in the universe. The center of the universe, the center of reality, is actually the person of Jesus Christ, who is the way that we can really see and connect with God. That's heavy theology, but there is this interesting connection. And then if you think about it as an astrophysicist, as I do, we understand that all the atoms, or many, let me put it this way, many of the atoms that make up our own bodies were actually forged in other stars. We are physically connected to the rest of the universe. And that was true for Jesus too. His body was a human body. So here you have the one representing the aspect of God that's responsible for the universe, also wearing a body that contains things forged in the universe. So this is kind of mind-blowing. The whole point is that the God of the universe is holy and majestic and powerful, but is also personal. And it is that personal aspect of God that gives us hope individually, as revealed in Jesus Christ.
Many thanks to Jennifer Wiseman for speaking with me. This episode was produced by Heather Bigley. Our production team also includes Aaliyah Ebert, Katarina Martinic, Soraya Pearson, and James Sturdivant. Our post-production team includes DJ Cromarty, Gracie Davis, and Mark Hansen. Spread the word about In Good Faith by leaving a comment and subscribing wherever you get your podcasts. In Good Faith is committed to the idea that we all benefit from hearing people of widely varying backgrounds share their personal experience with faith and belief. We think people with such experience deserve some of our best listening. Find us on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. Our YouTube page is youtube.com/in-good-faith. In Good Faith is a production of BYU Radio. I'm Stephen Cap Perry. I hope you join us again soon, right here in Good Faith.